In this video, we're going to take a look at a blue-black ink by Diamine Twilight. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Also, down in the description is a link to the blue-black playlist, so if you wanted to see more, you can find that there. I'm an ink guy, and let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, no spread, no shading for any of them. We do get that the extra fine looks much lighter than everything else on the page. The medium looks a little darker than the extra fine, and the stub looks a little darker than the medium. The extra fine took 13 seconds to dry, while medium took 19. Scrubby for both, say no color variation, and the writing agreed. The smear test says you can recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Pen BBS 456 with a 1.5 stub was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, minor ghosting. We have no feather, no spread, no shading. The extra fine's the lightest tone on the page, while the medium's quite a bit darker than the extra fine, and the medium is the same tone as the stub. Extra fine took 20 seconds to dry, while medium took 27. Scrubby for both said, "You don't get color variation, man." And the writing sample said, "Yeah, I agree. No shading for you." And the smear test, it wants you to be able to recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And this is a ridiculously complicated ink that they've mixed here. Look at the bottom, how they've got this kind of purple tone that's working its way up. Now the purple does form a little bit of a line, it moves up, but then we come to this very nice green. And then on top of that, a nice bright blue. Not three that I would normally think to put together to come up with a blue-black. Well done. The one on the right is let dry for 10 minutes before it's put in the water, and the most noticeable difference between them is the darker line left by that purple, indicating that it might be a little bit of a resistant part of this ink, although it's a diamine and doesn't say it's permanent, so I'm going to venture the guess it's not very resistant, but I've been wrong before. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, no spread, no shading. Only some tone variation. The stub and the medium are the same tone, and the extra fine's a bit lighter than them. Extra fine took 15 seconds to dry, while the medium took 20. Scrubby for both gave no color variation. There was none in the writing, and the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink could be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handles itself exceptionally well. I would feel very safe using this in a note-taking situation if I needed to go back and highlight. Now, water is completely reactivating. You see a lot of the white of the paper coming through, which was kind of expected because this is a diamine ink. It only took water to get it out of my pen, and the pen flush didn't do anything more than the water did, so there's no need to introduce additional chemicals. 1/3 bleach solution completely removed it from the page. You're not going to need it. The next writing sample is done on yellow Rhodia paper. We're not looking for performance change, we're looking for tone change that would happen. And what we see here is none. It is exactly the same. It is a very opaque ink. Now with that there's none, the interesting thing is it shows it could be affected. It's not being affected in the writing. They look the same. Same tones. Actually the extra fine looks a little bit lighter, but that's about it. But when we look at the smear, we see that the smear does take on a bit more of a green look to it. But you know, this is going to work very well in that professional environment. It's still going to look like the blue-black that you want it to be. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Diamine Twilight has a viscosity of 1.84, making this a wet ink. The next writing sample is done on lemon paper. Not known to be fountain pen friendly, and it is showing why here. We have a lot of spots that are bleeding very deep into the page. There's good news though. This did not come through and touch the page underneath. It only means that you can't use the back of the page. So that's good. What's not good? Feathering in the stub. Feathering in the medium. No feathering in the extra fine though, so there's some good news depending on your pen choice. No spread. No shading in any of them. We still get tone variation where the extra fine shows itself as lighter than the medium, and the medium is just a hair lighter than the stub. The extra fine took 8 seconds to dry while the medium took 12. Scrubby for both show no color variation, and neither did the writing. The smear test you could recover, so you don't have to worry about it because you can't smear it. That's what I meant to say. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Whatever. Diamine Twilight has an average dry time of 19 seconds, meaning it's normal. The last writing sample is done on black and red paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. No feather, no spread, no shading. Only tone variation where the extra fine is lighter than the medium or stub that are the same tone. The extra fine took 10 seconds to dry while the medium took 14. Scrubby for both give no color variation, and neither did the writing, and the smear test you could probably recover if you smeared while you were writing. Instead of finding inks that look like Diamine's Twilight, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went with a red ink by Colorverse, Redshift. Now, if you would prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Diamine's Twilight? This writes like a very dark blue, but under the right conditions, you can get shading and then it looks good. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? I really wound up with a strong preference from a dry broad or dry stub. It made it look much more like a blue-black than it did a dark blue, and the shading was very standout like that. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to look at a shimmering ink by Pen BBS, their number 261.